Hello everybody. We are going to talk about the gastrointestinal system, which is also known as the digestive system. First we'll see the parts of this important system. Then we'll talk about the important functions of the digestive system. Then we'll talk about the structure of the digestive system. We'll talk about the individual parts, important parts of this system. We'll talk about the stomach. We'll talk about the small intestine. We'll talk about the large intestine and other accessory organs such as liver, gallbladder, pancreas, and clinical conditions or diseases related to the digestive system. So first, if you see the parts of the digestive system is divided into two parts. One part is called gastrointestinal tract or GI tract. And GI tract or gastrointestinal tract is a long tube from the mouth to the anus. And at different locations, this tube is narrow, and at different other locations, it gets wider or expanded. So let's see the parts of that long tube, which is called the GI tract. First organ or structure is the mouth, and next organ is a muscular tube which is called the pharynx. Then after the pharynx you have a long narrow tube that takes the food from the pharynx to the stomach. So esophagus is that long narrow tube. It takes the food bolus from the pharynx to the stomach. Stomach is a very dilated or expanded part of the tube, and after the stomach you have the tube again gets narrow and very long. That is long narrow tube. The tube is called the small intestine. Okay. Then after the small intestine, the tube again gets wider and forms the large intestine, and then the rectum, anal canal, and anus. So those are the parts of that long tube from the mouth to the anus, and the food stuff moves downwards, and different organs have different functions. Now, outside of that tube or GI tract, you have accessory organs. Those are not the parts of that long tube. Those are located outside. Salivary glands secrete saliva into the mouth. So they are located around the oral cavity or mouth, and through the ducts or tubes from the salivary glands, saliva is released into the mouth, and this saliva, keeps the mouth moist and makes you to help to form the bolus of the food. So when you masticate the food or chew the food, the saliva is secreted into the mouth, and that helps to form the semi-solid bolus of food. And that saliva also has slippery secretion, and that secretion helps to move the bolus towards the pharynx. That is the start of the swallowing of the food. Saliva also contains amylase, which is a digestive enzyme, and lipase. uh, then you have liver. Liver is a large organ or gland of the body, and liver is mainly responsible for the metabolism of the nutrients. Uh, so most of the nutrients go from the GI tract to the liver, and the liver first processes those nutrients. Then you have gallbladder, which is a pouch just under the liver, and it stores bile, and this bile helps to digest the fat. So when you eat more fat-rich food, the gallbladder contraction of gallbladder occurs, and that ejects the bile, and that ejected bile enters into the intestine and helps the digestion of the lipid or fat. Pancreas, another very important organ, accessory digestive organ. It produces pancreatic juice that contains amylase, lipase, and protease. So all three types of digestive enzymes are present in that pancreatic juice. I'm mentioning again: amylase, lipase, protease. Amylase for the digestion of carbohydrates, lipase for lipids, and protease for protein digestion. So these are the parts of the digestive system or gastrointestinal system. Functions. The main functions are digestion. This system is called digestive system, so digestion is an important function of this system. What is digestion? Digestion is the breakdown of food. So conversion of large food into small molecules. So after the digestion of proteins, carbohydrates, fats, small molecules are formed after the breakdown, and that process is called the digestion. And the end product of digestion, the carbohydrates are converted to glucose, fats are converted to triglycerides, and proteins are converted to small amino acids. So these are the smallest molecules of carbohydrates, fats or lipids, and proteins. Then next process or function is absorption. What is absorption? After the digestion occurs, breakdown of food occurs, these small food molecules, these are called nutrients, are taken into the blood from the intestine. So from the intestine, blood absorbs or takes these nutrients into it, and that process is called absorption. Now the blood will take these nutrients where? To the liver for the metabolism. Mainly metabolism occurs in the liver. First processing of the nutrients take place in the liver. So from the intestine, blood takes the nutrients to the liver, and liver processes these nutrients to produce ATP. So metabolism is the process by which the nutrients are converted to ATP. Breakdown of nutrients or catabolism of nutrients produce ATP, and you all know that ATP is the source of energy. It gives energy. Okay. Then those foodstuffs are not absorbed or not taken into the blood. They will get out as feces, and that process is called excretion or elimination of waste. So those are 4 important processes or functions in the digestive system: digestion, absorption, metabolism, and excretion or elimination. So unnecessary foodstuffs get out from the body, from the intestine as feces. Now here I'll quickly show you the parts of the digestive system. First, let's see the parts of that long tube, which is called the GI tract. This is the oral cavity or mouth, and then you have the muscular tube called the pharynx, and then you have the esophagus, long narrow tube that takes food bolus from the pharynx to the stomach, and this dilated wide organ is called the stomach. And then from the stomach, the food stuff enters into the small intestine. This is the first part of the small intestine, which is called the duodenum, and then you have other 2 parts here. The second part is called the jejunum, and last part is called the ileum. So small intestine is a long narrow tube, starts here and located here, surrounded by the large intestine, and it has 3 parts: duodenum, which is short, first part, and then jejunum, and ileum is the last part. So from the last part of the small intestine, food stuff enters into the large intestine. So first structure of the large intestine is called the cecum. Here you see this part is called the cecum. This is the beginning of the large intestine. Okay, so the small intestine gives the food stuff to the cecum here, and then this part is called the ascending colon. This part is called the transverse colon, and this part going downwards is the descending colon. And then there is another part of large intestine that is called sigmoid colon, and then rectum, anal canal, and anus. So those are the structures. Now you see a tiny worm-like or small finger-like structure extends from the cecum, and that I believe all of you have heard the name of it. It is called the appendix, also called vermiform appendix. Vermiform means worm-like, looks like a worm. And inflammation of the appendix is called appendicitis. We'll talk about that. Okay, so those are the parts of GI tract or alimentary canal, which extends from the oral cavity or mouth to the anus. Then outside of that GI tract, you have accessory organs that I mentioned. Liver is a large organ where the processing of nutrients, after the absorption, nutrients are taken to the liver, and where first processing of the nutrients take place. Then this is the gallbladder just under the liver. It is a pouch that contains the bile. Okay, and bile helps you in fat digestion that I mentioned. Then you have the pancreas here, produces pancreatic juice that has amylase, lipase, protease. Okay, all kinds of digestive enzymes are present in the pancreatic juice. So now you can understand if someone's gallbladder is removed, then bile cannot be stored in the gallbladder, so the digestion of fat will not occur enough. If someone has disease in the pancreas, then pancreatic juice, if pancreatic juice production is not enough, then the digestion of all kinds of nutrients or food stuff will be hampered, because pancreas produces all kinds of digestive juices, amylase, lipase, proteins. Stomach is a very dilated, expanded, J-shaped muscular organ, and two main functions of the stomach are digestion and storage of food. Stomach has gastric glands, okay, and the main chemical that is secreted from the gastric gland is the hydrochloric acid, HCl, and that hydrochloric acid helps in digestion or breakdown of food. And to complete that breakdown or digestion process, the food must stay or be stored inside the stomach for hours. So storage of food and digestion of the food properly, those are two important functions of the stomach. So after the digestion, the food stuff then becomes very liquid kind of food, and that enters into the small intestine. Now, the parts of the stomach. If you see a stomach, we divide the stomach into three parts. This dome-shaped part is called the fundus, and the area where the esophagus ends, that area is called the cardia. And cardia is actually located in this big middle portion under the fundus. This is called the body of the stomach. So in the body part, the part of the body where the esophagus enters, only that part is called the cardia. Okay. So this is the fundus, this is the body, this area is called the cardia, and this part, the end part of the stomach, is called the pyloric part. Okay. And then you have sphincter here. So this part is the pyloric part, this whole part, and pyloric part is divided into two. This first part of pyloric part is called pyloric antrum, and the last part is called the pyloric canal. So this pyloric part is this part, and it has two segments: pyloric antrum, the wider part, and pyloric canal is the narrow end part. And then you have the small intestine, you see duodenum, first part of the small intestine, and here you have a sphincter that is called the pyloric sphincter. If you see the cross section and see inside, not cross section, the longitudinal section here, and see inside the stomach, you see inside the stomach you have many mucosal foldings, and these are called rugae, gastric rugae. Okay, these foldings. And when the stomach is full, these rugae disappear because of this pressure. Because of the expansion of the stomach, the foldings get flat. And when the stomach squeezes, stomach is empty, these rugae become more clear or prominent. So rugae help you to expand the stomach, help the stomach to expand when a lot of food enters into it. Now, This is the pyloric sphincter. Okay, and where the esophagus enters, you have esophageal sphincter. So esophageal sphincter regulates the entrance of food bolus, and pyloric sphincter regulates how much food stuff will enter into the duodenum, small intestine. Okay, so those are the parts of the stomach, and inside the stomach you see two sphincters and rugae. Now, esophagus is a narrow muscular tube. It is about 10 inches long in adult, and from the pharynx, food goes to the stomach through the esophagus. Now, you see here, this is the esophagus, and when you swallow the food very fast, the food bolus passes through the esophagus and very quickly enters into the stomach from here to here. And there is a movement in the wall of the esophagus that is called peristalsis, and the inner surface of the esophagus is very slippery because of the mucus secretion. So those two things, mucus in the inner surface that makes the surface slippery, and the peristalsis type movement quickly moves the food bolus from the pharynx to the stomach. Okay, and peristalsis is a wave-like movement. So it starts from the food bolus and goes one after another to move the food downwards. So wave-like movement, it goes one after another like waves. That is called peristalsis. Okay, then after the stomach you have the small intestine. I mentioned already that it has three parts: duodenum, which is first short part, then middle part is the jejunum, and last part is the ileum. Now if you see inside the small intestine, you'll see circular folds like this, circles, and these are called plica circularis. Okay, plica circularis here, plica circularis. So now if I see just only one plica circularis here, this one, and take this part, this is the part you see here, and in plica circularis you have many finger-like structures like this. These are called villi. Okay, so this is just a section of one plica circularis, and you see many villi, finger-like structures, and the villi increase the surface area of absorption of food. Why? Because foodstuffs are here, nutrients, and I told you absorption is the process by which the nutrients are taken from the small intestine into the blood here. So this is inside this small intestine here. So from here the food nutrients are taken into the blood, and more surface area means more absorption. Okay. Now remember, almost everywhere in that long tube or GI tract, in the wall, you have 4 layers. From inside to outside, you remember these 4 layers. You have these layers in the esophagus, in the stomach, in the small intestine, large intestine. So everywhere you will see 4 layers in the wall. From inside to outside, you remember these names: mucosa, then submucosa, then muscular layer is called muscularis externa. This muscular layer helps to contract the esophagus or stomach or intestine. Okay, so helps to contract, and that contraction is very important to move the food downwards. To move the food, you need the contraction of the GI tract. That is helped by the muscular layer. Okay, and then outermost layer is called the serosa. Okay, serosa. So mucosa, submucosa, sub means under the mucosa, submucosa, muscular is external, smooth muscle layer, and serosa is the outermost layer, mainly for the protection. So those four layers are present almost everywhere in your GI tract. Okay, now here you see again the small intestine. This is the duodenum after the stomach, right? Duodenum, and then ileum is here. Jejunum, second part, and last part is the ileum, and the end of ileum is here. So ileum ends into the cecum. Cecum is the first part of the large intestine, right? And this is the finger-like structure or worm-like structure called the vermiform appendix. You know about that? I already talked about that. So cecum, then ascending, transverse, descending colon, and then sigmoid colon, then rectum, anal canal is here, and anus. Now duodenum is the shortest first part of the small intestine. It is about 10 to 12 inches. That means, well less than 1 foot. But ileum is very long, the longest part of the small intestine, about 12 feet length, and jejunum is about 8 feet long. This is the middle portion, by the way. This is the last portion. This is the first portion. Okay. Now, the colon is about 5 feet long. It's much shorter than the small intestine, right? And extends from here. This is called ileocecal valve. Why? Because this is the end of the ileum and this is the beginning of the cecum. So ileum, last part of the small intestine, ends into the cecum. There is a valve here, right? So that is the ileocecal valve. And from here it goes all the way to sigmoid colon. So cecum, ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid colon. So those are the parts of the colon. And then next part of large intestine is the rectum and anal canal and anus. Okay, so you just learn these few things in first part of next lecture. Then I will post the second part, which is more like clinical conditions in these organs or parts of the digestive system. So first you need to know the anatomy or biology of the digestive system, parts of the digestive system, their functions, and then we will talk about the clinical conditions. Now, let me briefly talk about the functions of individual parts, although I have already mentioned some of these. So, first organ is the oral cavity or mouth. What happens inside the mouth? You all know that. Number one, your tongue, which is inside the mouth, that helps to mix the food with saliva. Saliva secretion occurs from the salivary glands right here. So parotid salivary gland, sublingual, and submandibular. Those are three sets of salivary glands. Okay? Parotid is the largest one, just in front and below the ear. So parotid, sublingual means under the tongue, lingual means tongue, submandibular is under the mandible, this bone. So those three salivary glands secrete saliva into the mouth, which is highly watery secretion that keeps the mouth moist and make the food moist and wet to help to form the food bolus. So food bolus is formed inside the mouth, and you have teeth in the mouth, so you cut the food, crush the food. That is called chewing of the food. So chewing and mixing with the saliva, those are two important functions of the mouth. Then after you get the food bolus in the mouth, then you use the tongue to push the food bolus behind. So food bolus enters into the pharynx, and then from the pharynx very first goes to the stomach. So transportation or passage of food from the pharynx to the stomach is the function of the esophagus. Then food is stored in the stomach for a few hours, and I mentioned that a lot of hydrochloric acid secretion and other chemicals are secreted to digest that food and makes the food liquid. So semi-solid food stuff becomes liquid. And then so storage and digestion, those are two functions of main functions of the stomach. Then the liquid food stuff enters into the duodenum, first part of the small intestine, and then passes through that long jejunum and ileum. And while the food passes through the small intestine, absorption of food takes place. That means the nutrients, fine food molecules, are taken into the blood, and from there the blood takes the food to the liver by hepatic portal circulation. And inside the liver, I mentioned already, first processing of the nutrients take place and some metabolism occurs to produce ATP. Then the large intestine mainly absorbs water and electrolytes. Nutrients are mostly absorbed in the small intestine, like proteins, carbohydrates, fats, glucose, amino acids, triglycerides, and large intestine absorbs the water and electrolytes. So when the food stuff passes through the large intestine, a lot of water absorption occurs, so food becomes solid. And that solid food stuff then is excreted this way, and that is the elimination or excretion of feces. Those unnecessary unwanted food stuffs, those will be excreted out from the body. So those are the important functions of the different structures or parts or organs of the digestive system. So let's stop here, and in the next lecture I'll talk about the clinical conditions related to the digestive system.